Yeah.
No clapboard or anything.
No, no.
Amateurs,
Amateurs, aren't they? Naughty fucking amateurs.
Try and make out they're washable.
Non-focused appliances.
Yeah, they don't capitalise
No
on
French
the moment,
accents.
ever. Right.
Oh, look, a unicorn. Don't see many of them around anymore.
I want to see this.
Right, we're rolling, are we?
Oh, then 3, 2, 1.
Good morning.
Morning.
Here we are at the tail end of Bearded Theory, and this is NFA-TV, and we're about to talk to Mr. Wally Dean. Or he's known as Wally Dean for very, very interesting reasons, which I'll try to ask him, and he'll try to tell me. So, Dean, you were just telling me something actually about 3 years old, was it, your first drug experience?
Yeah.
You just told me.
Yeah.
Tell that camera, right, what you just told me about what happened on your what was on your kitchen table.
We lived outside. We lived outside Barnstable. We were squatting an old, bit disused railway
your
line.
parents were squatting.
Yeah, and they had there was a big old railway shed, and I think there was about 6 of us living in it. And I was a little 3-year-old kid. My sister was a babe in arms at that point. And apparently one day I found a microdot on the table.
LSD.
Yeah, and Operation Julie, proper stuff as well.
Proper stuff.
And so I necked it, and my mum's freaking out, going, "Oh, we've got to take him to hospital. But what happens if we take him to hospital? They're going to, social services." And my dad, calm as anything, just said, "It's all right, just sit with him. It'll only be 8 hours or so." So, yeah, my first trip was at 3 years old. So.
What did they tell you behaved like?
I was pretty serene, really, apparently. Yeah.
See, kids are unfazed. The kid wouldn't even give it half a thought.
I think kids are sort of tripping anyway.
Well, yeah, exactly. I bet you didn't even give it a thought. But I wonder if the effect that had on your future. Because obviously your parents, you're saying, there's a microdot on your kitchen table, left there by your parents or friends of.
Yeah.
So they're the type of parents that are already the beat generation.
My mum had met Jimi Hendrix when she was 15. She helped organise a gig in Aldershot in Hampshire, the Bingo Hall. And it was Engelbert Humperdinck, Cat Stevens, Jimi Hendrix, the Walker Brothers, and it was like one of these showcase gigs they went round.
I'd have gone for Engelbert.
Anger Bang
Last
Dinga Bong.
Walk's one of the greatest songs ever written.
Yeah, no,
So,
that.
You could say you were born into the subculture.
You would,
born into the underground.
There's actually on Jimi Hendrix acoustic sets. There's actually because he wrote Little Wing about her.
About your mum?
Yeah, when
what was your mum's name?
Janice. Yeah, Janice Phillips.
Denise.
Janice.
Janice.
Yeah.
Janice.
And when he used to
what's
talk,
your surname then?
Phillips.
Janice Phillips.
Yeah.
Let's immortalise Janice Phillips. Jimi Hendrix knew her.
But when he was doing press interviews, because he was a tall, lanky fella, and my mum was quite petite.
Hendrix was tall.
He'd lean with his
tall.
elbow on the top of her head, and that's why she became Little Wing, because she was always there under his wing.
You could have stood his pint.
And that's what he always used to say, is I've taken you under my wing. And so from that, basically, Lemmy was a roadie for Hawkwind, and when Jimmy was murdered, they
Oh, you called it murder, look
yeah,
at that.
no, I know.
I know that.
My mum had been warned by a couple of the roadies, Lemmy and, was it Tuppy? The fella who wrote, in the end, wrote up before he died that he knew that Jimmy had been killed by Mike Jeffries, who had a lot of debts.
Oh, I thought it was Chandler and the other bloke from the Animals.
No, it was
what's the bloke in the Animals called, Jack?
Eric Burton.
Eric Burton. I heard it was them two in Newcastle.
Mike Jeffries had been taken. He was the manager for Jimmy, but had also been shown to be CIA, NMI6.
American.
And he had a hell of a lot of gambling debts and what have you. And so he was siphoning money off to the side. And he reckoned that Mike Jeffries had spiked him at the Rainbow Bridge gig, which was meant to be a Black Panthers gig, and so he was tripping when he was trying to play, and he said he couldn't get himself together. So anyway, with Lemmy being Jimmy's roadie, and Jimmy's obviously been knocked off, so Lemmy then went to work for Hawkwind, and sort of took my mum along with him, sort of thing.
Oh, they were friends.
So then we became really good friends with Hawkwind. Some of my earliest memories are going to Hawkwind gigs and that. And that's how we ended up at Stonehenge in '76 for Wally's funeral.
What age did you say you first stood at an Hawkwind gig? It's been around.
Guildford Free Festival, I think they were at.
Production, umbrellas.
But yeah, no, the first festival I remember was Guildford Free Festival in 1973, and I was 4. And I saw
You were 4 at Guildford Free Festival.
Yeah, and I saw Mungo Jerry, and they traumatised me for some reason. I still don't like Summertime as a song. But
oh yeah, Mungo Jerry.
So anyway, we ended up at Stonehenge.
I like
in
Summertime.
76.
So you ate it, look.
You weren't in amongst a load of naked hippies when they were dancing to it when you were 4 years old, you know.
Yeah, because well, you do. Kids have an anti-reaction, but you've gone along with it, haven't you?
Well,
you were born into the subculture. You're still in the subculture.
Yeah, no, it's important. You know, it's not. I don't even think of it as a subculture. I just think of it as my culture.
Your culture, your society.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because there's definitely a dichotomy in society.
Yeah.
So did you get to go to school?
I went to about 16, 17 different
But
schools
by
all
then,
over the
there
place.
wasn't really as such a travelling community yet, was there by then?
There were a few that were starting. I mean, my dad had an ambulance. I think my dad first got an ambulance in about 78. And
first thing I saw was ambulances. Go on anyway.
I remember going along to that 7777 one on Street Hill down in Somerset, which is where I'm now living. And I remember that because we were all flying kites on the top of the hill and what have you. And there were a lot.
You're 7.
I'd have been 77. Yeah, I'd have been 8. I'd have been because I was born 69.
So your parents moved from house to house.
We used to do
Or
festivals
place.
all summer, and then my
They
dad.
were living it.
Yeah, my dad would find somewhere to rent for the winter. We'd get ourselves a winter let, and so sometimes we'd be in a holiday chalet on the Cornwall coast, Devon. We stayed in communes in the Forest of Dean and stuff like that, and moved about.
You never had an anti-reaction.
No.
So are they still alive?
No, my mum
Sadly.
passed on last year. In fact,
that's sad.
tomorrow or the day after.
Did you stay close to her?
Yeah,
how
really
about
close.
that, see? No, none of that teenage rebellion. But they put you into schools as best they could.
Yeah, no, I did pretty good out of it. But anyway, so I ended up at Stonehenge in 76, when it was actually in the Stones field. You know, it was actually encircled with stones.
Yeah.
And that was obviously when Wally Hope's ashes turned up at Stonehenge.
Wally Hope's ashes?
Yeah, Wally Hope
He's
had
already
died the year
dead.
before. Yeah, Wally Hope died in September 1975. And so the following summer solstice, his ashes were put out in Stonehenge, which, going back to my mum, at spring equinox this year, I put my mum's ashes in Stonehenge.
Did you?
So my mum's there now.
Paddy's ashes are at
So
Stonehenge.
every time I go there.
We jumped a little bit then, so because Wally Hope was going to figure obviously in this. How did you know Wally Hope?
I don't know that I really knew him. I think I've got vague. My dad knew
He
him.
must have been much older.
I remember a
few
big
years older
smiley,
than you.
you know, big smiley
So
face.
he's a friend of your dad's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was sort of front row at the when you see film of the '76 Ashes ceremony. I'm actually in the front row, you know, watching all of this. And it must
Wally's
have
part of the ceremony, is it?
Wally's box was right in the middle of the
he's dead.
circle.
Yes, so it's a ceremony for Wally.
And Sid Rule was running it. And a lot of the Wallies felt a bit peeved about that. They felt it had been sort of kidnapped, you know.
So there's a group of people call themselves the Wallies.
There were a group of about 30 people that had, after the '74 festival, had stayed on and squatted Stonehenge, and that squat carried on until August 1974, which is when they were taken to the High Court in London, and an eviction was sought by the Department of Environment, and obviously the case was lost. But Wally still came out saying, "We've won. You know, we can't lose. We're not squatters. We're men of God."
Exactly. Stonehenge, you couldn't hurt it if you tried.
Nah.
And who owns Stonehenge? No
We
one.
do. We do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whose
so how can you
heritage?
squat
Our
your own
heritage.
land?
Yeah, exactly.
So
basically, once they got evicted in August, they moved out onto the Drove, which is where we still try and celebrate Stonehenge now. And that was never evicted. Fort Wally was never evicted because
Fort Wally.
Yeah.
It was called Fort
the higher
Wally.
part of the Drove on the north, the south side of the Drove, get on the
They
high
haven't
bit up
managed to
towards the
keep him
stone.
quiet, have they?
No,
at all.
they'll never keep the Wally spirit down.
No, so would you say you're the leading light in the Wallies now?
I wouldn't.
You're number one Wally.
No, not number. No, it's like being. I'm not number one. I don't like. I just. Maybe I'm
people
sometimes an
associate
example,
you-
but
Number one example.
yeah,
That's
sort
good.
of try and live it. When I was
Keeping
living
his
in.
name alive
Yeah.
very much, and
Yeah.
act with a conscious determination.
Definitely.
And quite right.
Well,
Have you still got the ashes box? You must have.
Yeah, the Ashes box
That's
is
going to be at
safe.
Stonehenge in June, is it?
It will indeed.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll
it will
I'll
indeed.
see that again then.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It was there.
So, can you tell NFA-TV how the state killed Wally Hope? Because the state did kill Wally Hope.
Yeah, but after organising the '74 festival and the eviction, etc., they were quite annoyed with him, and they'd started this operation called Operation Stuff.
Operation
Stuff.
Stuff.
STUFF, which stood for Stop These Unlawful Free Festivals.
I don't know.
And very few records have been able to get out.
I've
'cause
never
we don't,
heard of it.
No, we don't have a very good public information service in this country. You know, they keep their
Freedom of
secret.
information, Dean. What are you talking about? How
But-
can you say that?
There was an undercover copper.
Boris is Britain.
There was an undercover copper working on Operation Julie, a fella
Look
called
how we
Martin.
dealt with that Assange fella.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, go on.
There was a fella called Martin Pritchard who was an undercover copper working on the Operation Julie, and from '74 they'd been monitoring the whole scene. He'd infiltrated. He'd been a hippie up in Wales around Smiler's place in Llandewis Brevi, and Austin Hughes, his real name. Yeah, and
I
so
don't know
basically
his
this
real name,
undercover
that's why
copper
I know.
wrote a book called Busted with a fella from the Daily Mail,
Oh, right.
who and they put out this book,
Dog.
and it had a whole couple of pages on Operation Stop These Unlawful Free
Did
Festivals.
it?
And I mean, they were filming at Watchfield. They infiltrated the Free Press at Windsor. There were probably a few at Stonehenge.
Windsor was bigger, was more the place that stood out than Stonehenge back then when I was little,
But,
for sure. I didn't really...
Wally had been involved with the organisation of Windsor since '72. He'd gone along to Ubi Dwyer's early meetings and what have you, and he liked what he was doing, etc. And so he got involved. But then he saw a sort of committee growing up, and there was a lot of aggro about, you know, making money out of the festival, which wasn't Wally's bag. You know, it wasn't what he wanted to do. And there was apparently a famous argument with a hot dog stall that didn't want to pay them. Yeah, at the 70s.
Didn't want to give him a few bob.
This was at
Having
the
sold
73 one.
thousands of hot dogs.
And apparently he hadn't made much money. I think he'd
So
been
he
given
said.
quite a few away, and so they ended up this great big argument, and Wally decided it wasn't what he wanted. So while he was out in Ibiza tripping at the Cafe Del Mar watching the sunset, he thought, oh, what about Stonehenge? And so he then went back to England in the March and formulated the idea for the Stonehenge festivals. And the people, Penny and G at Dial House Commune, you know, they weren't crass then. They were still, I think their band was called Exit, which was sort of avant-garde sort
This
of.
is Penny Rimbaud.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
yeah. He made the Wally box.
Did
He was really close with Phil. And so basically Wally had come up with this idea of going to Stonehenge and get this festival involved. He got people like around him, a lot of the Chalk Farm squatters, etc., from London, Freestonia squatters, and that were all coming down because he, used to hang around in London quite a bit. And so they all got involved. Dial House did the first leaflets for '74, and it was a medium. There was only one band played, a band called Zorch.
Zorch.
Zorch, yeah, Zorch.
Yep. That's how
Really
I'd spell
lovely
Zorch.
electronical
Good
music.
band, yeah.
Apparently it comes from, when you set fire to a fertiliser bag and it drips down.
No, I don't. That's what makes it work in explosives, isn't it?
I guess so.
Yeah.
And basically, so about 30-40 people stayed on after the festival. And
Production, joint. Joint's finished.
Production, he didn't pass me yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
But
The staff these
So-
days, Dean.
I know, yeah,
Carry on.
not fucking applicable. So,
There's going to be more of them.
So basically, he got away with the 74 festival. Had a following that then became known as the Wallies. I mean, that was a lot to do with the press and what have you. You know, it was a quiet year. There was Watergate going on in America.
But Wally was alive, he had a following called the Wallies.
Yeah, oh definitely. Yeah, no.
And
well,
also,
his idea
from what you've just said, he is the catalyst of the Stonehenge Free Festival.
Oh, definitely.
So he's not just, you know, a name from the amongst the.
No, he took it there.
The law, if you like, the LORE law of
Yeah.
the festival history.
No,
he's the spark right at the beginning.
definitely.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about
And
that?
he regarded it as land that had been
He
stolen
is the
by
unknown soldier, isn't he?
He was the unknown soldier, definitely. But I'm making sure he's known, which is
He's
why I've always
we
loved
want
you.
him to be the known soldier.
There he is, causing chaos
He's
somewhere.
with us.
Yeah, he's always with us.
Wally's here.
No, but his idea was, I mean, he put a bit in the
With hope.
International Times that everyone's Wally, and his idea was that if
Everyone's
we had a
Wally.
commune
Oh, yeah,
where
look.
everyone was called Wally, then it would thwart their legal system. I mean,
Totally.
to be evicted from a piece of land, they had to have named individuals. So
We're
when
all
the
Wally.
exactly, when the Department of the Environment came down and were going round trying to ask for names, I'm Ron Wally, I'm Phil Wally, I'm So Wally, Wally Raleigh was
brilliant.
one, etc.
Genius.
And his idea was that
Genius.
legally they couldn't be evicted from land if they weren't named individuals. His idea was that if everyone did that, we could build communes, have land squats, etc., where everyone was Wally, and everyone was therefore equal. Which is why I was saying I'm not top.
No,
I'm just
you're
in
not.
there.
No,
I don't want
you
people.
can't be top.
I don't want people following me. I want them right next
Everyone's,
to me.
everyone's part of the Wally family.
Definitely,
Everyone's
definitely.
a Wally if they want to be.
Yeah. Which is, he also got the Sods together, the Secular Order of Druids, along with his mate Tim Sebastian, who was a good friend of John Michel, who did a lot of writing back from 1969 onwards about ley lines, earth energies, Stonehenge and Glastonbury being connected, etc. And between them, they came up with the idea of the Secular Order of Druids, and obviously secular means not as involved with the religion, more of the everyday sort of thing. And that they were founded in the church in Amesbury in Beltane, 1975, which was only a couple of days after that he got arrested. And basically,
I missed what you said happened in Amesbury. What about Amesbury?
the Sods were, they had an initial ritual where they got together and said, "We are the Sods."
That was at the Rings, was it?
It was in the presbytery at the church. They were really good friends with the vicar there, Father Tom. He used to come up and do services up at the Stones.
And he let them do that.
And he let them do that. He was an interesting vicar.
I can imagine he was. I knew one that didn't believe in God, which was interesting to carry on.
Later on,
believe in
it comes
God?
in handy.
Tom?
Yeah, in a wider way. I think he believed in the beauty of life. Yeah, he ended up being the minister up at Stroud, and apparently did a quite controversial mural which had naked men swimming and stuff like that in it. So he was definitely a bit of a life lover. So they got the Secular Order of Druids together, and then 4 days later the house was raided, because by this time they had a squat in London Road in Amesbury, and that got raided. It was an illegal raid, but the police said they were looking for army deserters, because that whole area is laced with military camps, etc. And to be fair, a lot of people having a bit of break from the army did go and hang out at the squats. But they came in one morning and they went through his stuff and found 3 acid tabs in his wallet, and so he was arrested for that, because it had
3 acid tabs.
Yeah. And he was then taken off to Winchester prison. And after about 8 days there, he turned up on morning parade in his pyjamas, saying that his prison uniform was making him itch. I mean, that doesn't make sense anyway, because...
Not turning up at breakfast. I don't think they have parades.
Yeah, no, apparently, yeah.
I went to prison, I never got put in a parade. Certainly you get checked.
Roll call sort of thing it was.
Well, yeah, I can't remember.
So they sent him off
lining
to the
up.
doctor anyway, and this doctor says to him, "Am I talking to Phil Russell," which was Wally's real name, or
Phil
am I
Russell.
Phil Russell,
Right.
yeah. Or am I talking to Wally Hope? And so pretty much by that time, the doctor had made up his mind
Schizophrenic.
that was two people, that Wally was obviously schizophrenic. So then he was sent off. I mean, by this, they were already heavily medicating him in hospital on Modicay, Weldorm, etc.
Well, after they'd arrested him for the free acid tabs, they hospitalised him inside the prison.
Yeah.
Why did
And
they put him in the hospital prison?
They,
Prison hospital.
Yeah.
Prison hospital. Sorry.
They did briefly, but then they shipped him off to psychiatric in Salisbury. He was in the Old Manor Hospital, which is opposite where the
They'd have
Crown
had
Court
to
is.
say, at least somehow, to illustrate that he was showing signs of mental aberration.
Walking around in the morning in your pyjamas, having two names, that was enough for them. You know, they wanted him. They wanted
could
to
write
break
that
him.
out to look,
Yeah,
they
they wanted to break him. So they sent him off to the mental hospital in Wiltshire, in Salisbury, and his medical dosages went up even more. He was Semidrin, haloperidol, Largactil, which was known as the medical cosh
Yeah,
at that
I know
point.
it was at the time, liquid cosh.
So he even got to appeal his court, and when he did,
Managing
he
to
was
keep some
so
of his
out of
wits
it.
about
No, he was really out of it. The
bet he
the
was.
doctor that was fighting his case fought for him, and
A doctor fought his case.
yeah.
What, you mean his lawyer found a doctor?
No, it'd been looked after by doctors since 1967. His dad had died, and his dad had appointed a couple of doctors, the Hatfields in Ongar in Essex, to be his legal guardians. That's how he happened to be near Dial House. Dial House is only like 3 miles from Ongar, and it was known to be a bit of a hippie hangout, etc. And so obviously Wally then turns up there, and it was quite an impressive turn up. I mean, in Penny's books he writes that he conjured up a snowstorm in a summer garden, you know. So he obviously had quite a profound effect on Penny Rambo and what have you.
He summoned a snowstorm in a summer garden.
Yeah.
Yes,
Or spiked Penny with acid. That's always
Yes.
been my intuition.
Well, things
But
can
so
happen.
yeah, he's in hospital, gets massively overdosed. The 1975 festival happens, and that happens out near the King's Barrows, on the top of the hill overlooking the Stones, and people are camping up in the woods. There's a couple of stages outside. Did someone just shout Wally then? There's a couple of people,
Wally's a bit
couple of
looked
stages out in the field. Joe Strummer played with the 101ers.
Where was this again, sorry?
It's at Stonehenge, but up by the
Yeah.
King's Barrows. You know the Barrows. If you look towards London from Stonehenge, there's that ridge of the hill,
Yeah.
and there's 5 barrows along it,
Yeah.
and they're known as the King's Barrows.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Well,
I should know
they
that, I
found
suppose,
some
but
real, sort of valuable artefacts when they excavated those
With their
rocks,
swords
grave
and
rocks,
shields.
basically.
Yeah, of course.
So the 75 festival happened, and it was a much bigger event. Wally had been out until May of that year, so there were festival posters that he'd done for the 75 gathering, including the beautiful one by Roger Hutchinson, you know, with the Druid above Stonehenge, which has become quite classic. And so he'd been promoting it up in London, you know, passing out leaflets in Ladbroke Grove and that. Obviously Joe Strummer's living just off the Ladbroke Grove in Elgin Avenue. That's where the name the 101ers came from. It was 101 Elgin Avenue.
Was it?
And so
Funny,
the
these old punks go right back into the hippie thing, don't they?
to be honest, I think the first punks were people like the Social Deviants, Mick Farron and that, who got the Fun City Festival together and
Really?
you know, MC5. I mean, some of their tracks. I mean, you know, they were hippies, but they were sort of punky hippies. You know, you can hear there wasn't much difference between that and, you know, in the same way that, you know, some of the early Hawkwind went into a little bit of, you know, that driving noise and what have you.
Hawkwind are the only prog rock band that the punks accept, or the punks did accept back then.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, that was because they were stalwarts. You know, they were doing every Stonehenge from then onwards. They were, you know, from '76, pretty much until, well, they would have played in '85 if we hadn't been beanfielded. You know, they'd done pretty much all the Stonehenge. Same as Here and Now. Here and Now were, you know, regulars providing us stages. Solar Ben, the Everyone's Involved band. So anyway, the '75 festival's gone off and it's been a massive success. Wally's still in hospital. There's petitions going around the site, release the free profits, because at that moment, Ubi Dwyer was in prison for promoting Windsor '75. Sid Rule, who'd been editor of the International Times, was in prison for advertising Windsor '75 in the International Times, because they'd made it.
In prison for that?
Yeah, he was in Pentonville. And Wally was obviously down in Winchester. Well, no, by the time of the festival, he was in the Old Manor Psychiatric. And so there was a petition going around the site, you know, free the free profits. There was talk about doing a walk down to the mental hospital, which was like 12 miles away, but that didn't materialise, obviously. 2 days after the last vehicles were pulled off of the festival site, Wally's then released from his mental health care.
2 days after that year's Stonehenge finishes, they release him.
June the 4th, 1975.
Interesting,
And, you know, therefore he's, cured of schizophrenia?
So it wasn't, the festival didn't have the Stonehenge to do with the solstice then, if you were leaving on June the, what did you say, 2nd?
No, July the 4th.
Oh, July.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. People were camped up there for a month.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
I mean, as we used to. We used to
that's
go there
probably
June
what
the
really
1st,
annoyed
didn't we?
them. It went on so long.
Definitely.
But anyway, carry on, Dean.
So he gets released and he goes back up to Ongar, and he's still in a terrible state from all the drugs they've been pumping into him, the antipsychotics, etc. And he's developed a condition which is called chronic dyskinesia, which is where basically these antipsychotic drugs can build up in the nerves and what have you, and stop your body communicating with your brain properly.
Oh, jeez.
So he had trouble walking.
Dyskinesia.
Dyskinesia, yeah.
Dyskinesia.
It means basically being
disconnected.
Yeah, disconnected from the brain.
Yeah, yeah.
And he had trouble with like eating, walking and stuff. I know that at Dial House they were, you know, giving him ginseng, various herbal teas, you know, flushing him through, washing through his livers, etc.
Flushing the poisons out.
And they were starting to get, him back to a situation where he could, you know, function again and, you know, quite well. But he was quite depressed. I mean, the time in hospital had done a lot of damage to him, etc.
Depressing me now.
Yeah. No, it's still. I tell you what, I've made a movie about Wally, and every time I've shown it over 100 times at various venues, and I still cry pretty much every time. Everyone's Wally.
Everyone's Wally.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to see that. Everyone's Wally.
I'll send
Remember
you a
that.
copy.
Check it out.
Yeah. Well, if you get in touch with me through the Wally Hope Appreciation Society on Facebook, I'm happy to send out movies, you know, downloads sort of thing.
Right, so everyone can get it.
I've been doing that for free, you know, and that's the way I like it, you know, for all Wallies. So basically, he gets out of the mental hospital, gets back, starts getting healthier, etc. Chris Waite, etc., who ends up setting up the TP Valley up in Wales.
Yeah, still there.
And him and Wally had become really good friends, and so they went off to Watchfield together. And during that festival, Wally and Chris were interviewed very much in this sort of situation, sitting in the TP, but doing an interview to camera, etc., about what their hopes for the future of the Free Festival was.
Right.
During which time, Wally and Chris discussed the fact that they needed to buy land near Stonehenge for a permanent festival site, you know, a year-long festival site. And Chris Waite had a lot of money. He'd had property out in Cork, out in Ireland, and he'd also had a couple of properties on Ladbroke Road, which he'd sold. So he could, you know, have money. He'd gone horse-drawn by then, living in a teepee, etc. And so together they were going to buy this piece of land, and they talked on camera very much like this. And Wally goes back to Ongar, and then on September the 4th, 1975, he's dead. He's found on the floor in a semi-conscious state. He's rushed to St Margaret's in Epping with Sylvia Hatfield, the female of the doctor couple. But once he gets to hospital, he's pronounced dead and so basically an inquest is called for. I mean, normally in the case of a suicide or something you're wanting to call a suicide, the first thing you'd do is think, right.
A death that doesn't have an obvious cause is going to get an inquest for sure.
I think they wanted to manufacture one.
Cut him up.
Because basically, the autopsy had been done. Now, if Wally had died, if Wally had died of well-derm, which is the drug they said he died of, then he'd have had a blue residue in his stomach. Which is
one of the drugs they were giving him.
Yes, that's what I mean. It was one of the drugs he was prescribed, so he would have access to it. But basically, the police kept fudging the inquiry. It had to be adjourned 3 times. And during the first inquiry, there was a needle mark at the top of his arm, up here, which Wally didn't use needles. I mean, he'd been depoted quite a few times in hospital, but they put a depot injection in your arse muscle.
A depot?
Yeah.
What's a depot?
It's a injection of Modicate.
To knock you out.
Yeah, basically, it's a sedative.
To restrain you.
Yeah, and so it had a lot of needle marks on his arse, but there was no explanation for this needle mark on his arm. And when that was brought up, they sort of, said, oh, it's got nothing to do with it, and we've got to go through the full pharmacopoeia of drugs to find out what he died from. And so they adjourned this case 3 times, and in the end decided that he'd committed suicide on an overdose of well-dorm.
Oh, yeah.
But like I said, Dr. Hatfield, Ted, who'd done this autopsy, I mean, this man had loved Wally since 1967.
Yeah.
And there he was doing an autopsy.
Qualified man.
Someone who lived in the family.
Qualified.
Exactly. And there was no residue from pills in his stomach.
At all?
There were no pill packets in the bedroom or in the front room or any of the rooms that he was using.
Still able to give that as an official verdict?
There was no medicine bottles, no packaging, even the doctor...
But you mean no traces of well-dorm were found in his body at all, and the official verdict is death from well-dorm?
They found it in his body, but there was no packaging, there was none of the like... If I wanted to do an overdose of paracetamol, then I'd do all the pills, but you'd find the old paracetamol box and
you find the traces,
the popper or the bottle, as it would have been.
Everyone clears up. They do what they're going to do to commit suicide. Then they tidy up, don't they? Everybody does.
Yeah. So
not at all.
But basically,
there's always paraphernalia.
And between the needle mark, the no residue, and no packaging, that makes the suicide verdict very, and
so what are you saying then? You're saying somebody snuck in there and jabbed him a well-dorm?
Yeah, this is basically what I believe. Penny did a year.
That's one of our chaps from the International Times.
Well, this is it. There were a lot of infiltrate, and in Martin Pritchard's book that I mentioned earlier, Busted, he says
perhaps even him himself.
Watchfield had been a real twos up to the system, people. It was a government allowed
I was a little
festival.
boy, I even remember the name Watchfield Common. It's a common, wasn't it? So why do I keep putting common with Watchfield?
Yeah.
Because I kept hearing about it.
Because they'd built
they'd
built an Air Force base for the Second World War on the common land. Common land had been stolen by the MOD.
Didn't give it back?
No.
Same
as the land all round Stonehenge.
Watchfield's in Berkshire.
Yeah, near Swindon. And it's the same with the land all round Stonehenge. That was taken, by MOD. There's actually photos where you can see Stonehenge.
That's why they test tanks, because you couldn't hurt it if you tried.
You can see
scrub.
You can see old pictures where Stonehenge is there, and there's an airfield right, just at the corner of the Drove sort of thing.
Right.
It was a full-on. I think it was a Canadian Air Force were using it.
There you are.
But basically, going back to the
fascism, then they keep it.
Exactly. But going back to the suicide, see, the doctor that had done his autopsy and that, who also brought up the needle mark at the inquest, etc., and never believed the verdict. He was still writing. I mean, he's passed on now. God bless him.
Yeah, rest in peace.
But he was still writing to the drug companies saying, look, if well-dorm was given in a liquid form by injection, that would make sense. Why was there no residue in his stomach? So he was still, the doctor...
There would be residue, there would be. Because if it had all been, took care of by the body, he would be dead.
No, exactly. And so basically, Wally was then gone. Penny, who was obviously friends with the Hatfields, doctors, etc., was asked if he wanted to do something with some of Wally's ashes. Because that was another thing as well. After the first inquest, Wally was then cremated. Which meant by the second inquest, when the needle marks disappeared from the autopsy reports, there was no body to go back to.
They burnt him as quick as they could.
They burnt him as quick as they could.
It's always a way to get rid of the evidence.
Definitely. So basically, Penny got some of the ashes and he built the box that I have now. He used to use them he used to sell them as art boxes. But he built a little box for Wally's ashes. He engraved it Wally Hope, a victim of ignorance.
Yeah.
And through Chris Waite, he said, right, I'm going to bring the ashes up to Stonehenge because I think that's where Wally would want to rest. And so in '76, at the summer solstice, when the festival had spilled into the field around the stones, you know, what is now English heritage land, you know. But we were let in. I mean, this is another thing as well. We were actually let into that field. We went down the road, expecting to be going off to the King's Barrows or what became later the festival field, and the security guard actually opened the gate into the Stonehenge field and let everyone in. You know, it was sort of manufactured. And then strangely, the next year, the Ministry of Works then has fences put up around Stonehenge.
Yeah, it's the excuse for the fences because you got in there.
So, but
even though they invited you. Basically.
So ritual went on. Wally's ashes were spread in the stones. Penny had intended to go off and burn the box when he got back to Dial House, but Sid Rule and a few of the other festival attendees took the box off, put it in a TP, etc. Penny felt a bit peeved that he didn't get it back, and he went back off to Dial House, which I think is a really bad moment. See, I think really, I mean, what we took on later as punks, or hippie punks, as me and Doghouse like to say, what we took on was greatly influenced by the fact that Crass and the hippie festival people had fallen out.
That was where they fell out, was it?
Yeah. It's not until '78 and that you start getting a few bands turning up. They tried to play in 1980. There was going to be Flux the Pink Indians were there as the epileptics, and apparently one of them were taking the mickey out of the bikers.
Is that how that all
and
kicked off?
The whole thing kicked off. I rember people, my dad hid a punk in the back of...
And punks out
we had
sleeping
punks,
bags.
yeah, we had
that.
punks hiding in the back of our van because these
my
bikers...
toe was in there by then, just about.
Yeah.
Well, I lived in Bournemouth and I did try to go on the site. I was very young.
Yeah.
17, I'd stay overnight and go home, my toe was in the water, that's all.
Yeah.
But anyway, carry on, Dean.
So, from that moment on, people had decided that we were going to keep Stonehenge, Stonehenge
you were going to keep Wally in the box.
Well, Wally was in the stones.
How does
by
Penny
that time.
feel about the fact the box never went back to him? Because he's still doing his stuff now.
When I first took
any idea how he feels?
Yeah.
Does he feel the box shouldn't be extant?
No, he's happy with it now.
Does he feel it should be burned?
No, he's happy with it now because he realised that we've helped. As I said,
it is an icon now almost.
Yeah, definitely.
But it should be,
in '75, Phil had started doing. Penny had started doing his own investigation into the wiping out of Wally. Yeah, which became. Do you remember in Christ the Album? We got a booklet.
I'm not a big
the size of the album, and it was called.
Surprisingly enough, I'm not that familiar with the Crass.
But they gave out a booklet in Christ the Album, which gave the full story of Wally out.
Right.
And so that story then started circulating amongst the punks. The punks realised that Stonehenge was quite an important part of it, which is why then you've got like people like Amiga Tribe.
Well, that's when I started going to the free festivals, just when you start to see punks amongst them.
Definitely. And I thought it was beautiful. I mean, I'd been there.
Me too. Do you remember
the festivals?
A little thing at Priddy?
Yeah.
On the way to Wow, between Stonehenge and Glastonbury.
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's the first free thing I ever went to.
Oh, that's where I go mushroom picking.
Apart from that, and stayed at properly. I said, I had my toe in Stonehenge. I'd pop up from Bournemouth and go back.
Out on Priddy Common.
That's the first that thing at Priddy was the first time I really dived in. There was a dyke tent.
Yeah.
50p.
Yeah.
They'd let you have a needle too.
Yeah.
Everyone used a queue for the needle. Sorry, I've lowered the tone of the interview. Apologies.
No, it's all good, bro.
Back to where we
It's
were.
true history. You
It's
can't
true.
lower
Remember the
truth
coppers
of
coming
history.
on site and people screaming, 50p a dike copper, you want one, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And one guy ran around the whole time we were there, it must have been 3 or 4 days, maybe more, going, you've all been systemised, you've all been systemised. Never forget him, running around all day and all night.
So basically, I mean, with the involvement of people like Mark from the mob, Penny tried to get back involved with Stonehenge but didn't really get on with it. But people, you know, like Flux Pink Indians, etc., continue trying to celebrate at Stonehenge. You know, I mean, in 1984, you've got Amiga Tribe, you've got the mob, you've got Flux Pink Indians. Like I say, you've got all sorts of punk bands playing at the festival. And I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, I really liked it. For me, it had been, you know.
I always remember going up there. They were just the last few people left of that '84 one. I always call it the dying embers because it turned out to be the last one.
Indeed.
I got parole in 1984.
Right.
And I came out in June, and it was on when I got out, and I got parole to Hungerford.
Right. Yeah.
Where I'm from was only got 32 miles, 34 miles.
Yeah.
So I went up there to get some blow, you know. I always remember standing there, and it was, you know, it was. I'll never forget dying embers of the, and it turned out to be the dying embers of the whole thing, really. Well, not the movement, because.
But
it was Stony Cross the next year, and
dying embers are the.
as it went on from there.
Yeah. Dying embers are the sparks that get the next fire going. See, I think without the '84 festival, you know, I mean, it was such a beautiful festival. I mean, they all had been, you know. '79 was quite quiet, but from 1980 onwards, it built up in strength. It built, you know, it was getting bigger and bigger each year. By '84, we'd taken that second field on the other side of the Drove, where the
got huge, hadn't it?
The pyramid stage was, etc. And it got huge, definitely. And I mean, the National Trust had been really good. They'd always had a sort of, you know, I mean, the National Trust idea is, well, we're living history.
Yeah. People,
you know,
have always
people were
there.
celebrating at Stonehenge 6,000 to 7,000 years ago.
Before
so
the word government was in the language.
1984 saw the change, and this is why the Stonehenge Festival stopped.
I blame Thatcher for destroying England.
I was just about to dirty my mouth by mentioning her name. So Thatcher wanted to stop the festivals, you know, because the name Peace Convoy comes from 1982, where a whole load of the Stonehenge Festival drove up to Greenham Common to help out with the support there, and they all put signs on their van saying Peace Convoy, etc., because they were going up to support the peace camp eviction. And so Thatcher saw them as a sort of flying picket movement, you know, as a mobile protest force. So Thatcher wanted...
Band of brigands.
Yeah, as
they called it,
Douglas Hurd. I mean, Douglas
was
Hurd
that Hurd
said,
that said that, was it?
Yeah. They resemble
a
band of medieval brigands with no respect for law and order.
They shot guns out the buses. That nonsense.
That was a reported case from 1982 when they were chasing the convoy round. Still, a lot of people saying it didn't happen, you know. But the headlines in the press were gun-toting hippies on a rampage, basically.
Yeah, I remember guns.
The Wild Bunch.
They said they had guns.
So Thatcher wanted to break the Stonehenge Festival, the Peace Convoy, because I mean, the Peace Convoy had become a whole community outside. You know, I didn't want to live in a council house. I wanted to be out with my friends on site and what have you. And you know, I saw that as the alternative. So Thatcher then got English Heritage together, you know, a non-governmental but basically driven by the government organisation, which took over ownership of a lot of the ancient sites. I mean, one of their big moves, they sold off 360 ancient sites which had been listed.
Really?
Because they saw them as non-profit making. Yeah, and from that moment on, Stonehenge then becomes a business. You know, it becomes somewhere that they can make a lot of money from. I mean, now they're making like
there's a roundabout
20 million a year now. You know?
Are they? 20 million?
Yeah. And
that's what really annoys me, that it's just a bit of scrub. You really couldn't hurt it.
And at that moment, with English Heritage taken over, there is no tolerance of the Stonehenge Festival, which is why we end up with June the 1st, 1985, with the Battle of the Beanfield. You know, people just going from Savernake down to Stonehenge
People's
to
out,
establish the
windows
site.
smashed, babies being dragged out of buses, and well, everyone knows.
There's been a bit of
the
talk.
Story.
Over the lockdown, I used my time to get a bit productive when I wasn't getting a bit too drunk, which is, I've given up again now, which is nice, being back to pre-lockdown settings. But during that
Having
time,
a drink again?
I collected a lot of pictures, and I managed, I won't mention the newspaper in case they ever see this, but I broke into a newspaper, hacked into their photos, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And I've now got, I think I got 36 more pictures of the Beanfield from them. And then weirdly,
never published pictures?
Never published, but
That's
they're all up
interesting.
there on Facebook.
What kind of thing do they show?
Oh, loads more of the trashing, lots
The
more
violence,
children.
The police hurting people.
Basically, they're trashing vehicles
And you're publishing
unnecessarily.
them, are you?
If you're on Facebook, they're all on
They're
the
up now.
Battle of the Beanfield group.
They're up now.
Yeah. And I've
Yeah,
put all the
seen
photos that I've got. I've got I've got original film footage from the Beanfield, etc. And strangely, someone had been going on at me, because I mentioned earlier I've got the Everyone's Wally movie. Well, they said get it up on Instagram, get it out there.
Absolutely, yeah, why not?
And I was like, oh, do I really want to? I'm already
You
on
wanna be involved
Facebook.
in
Do I?
that bloody Instagram?
So I thought, all right, what harm
and
can
you'll be
it
on
do?
Twitter next.
So I joined Instagram, and when I join something, I always do a search. I'll search Peace Convoy, I'll search Beanfield. So I put in the search Battle of the Beanfield, and this post popped up, and it was literally been put up 3 days before I joined Instagram, and it said, I've just found a roll of film undeveloped, think it might be the Beanfield.
Wow.
And so I got straight in touch with
Serendipity.
this fellow, whose name I won't mention either.
Oh, go on then.
And he gave me a further 14 pictures of the Beanfield.
And it was the Beanfield.
And we've actually got a picture of the tank. They had an armoured personnel carrier there.
Lots of those policemen were soldiers.
A lot of
I
them.
met one in a pub in
The ones without
Bournemouth who
boilers.
claimed he was one of them.
I used to
didn't
hitch
see
around.
any-
I'm still not a driver. I used to hitch around, and I won. I think it was
They're only up
1980
at Tidworth, aren't they?
Exactly. I think 1987. I got a lift from very close to Park House Roundabout, which is where the trashing took place. And this fella was a bus driver from Salisbury, and he had been on duty that night. He'd been driving buses that night, and he'd been sent up with a bus to pick up a load of police after the Beanfield. And he said
Take
the
them to
thing.
where?
He didn't say, but he said he was disgusted by what was coming out of their mouths. They were like, "Oh, you should have seen the one I had. I pulled her by her hair. I hit her with my truncheon."
He was proud of that.
There were people.
That was a woman he's talking about.
Yeah, there were people on the bus talking about going into people's homes with an axe and just trashing kids'
Smashing it to
toys,
pieces, yeah.
cooking utensils,
It was
and
shameless.
windows,
Shameless.
everything. And this bus driver was
is forever shamed by that.
never forgotten.
I was on the wrong side of the cordon. I couldn't get in. I went too late, set out too late. I was
But see-
with a mate in a car. That's all.
This is where my mum
Reminded
becomes
me.
serendipity again. 'Cause
But my mate had been talking to the chief constable, saying he was a reasonable fellow, could be communicated with.
Yeah.
The next thing was happening was what you're describing now.
yeah, I mean the Beanfield
Very
was a nice
reasonable
day.
fellow.
I'd have been on the Beanfield,
But he was under orders, wasn't he?
but it was my mum's birthday on June the 1st, and so she wanted a dinner. And so
Yeah.
I'd said to my friends, "Oh, I'll meet you up at Stonehenge once
Once the
you're up
dinner's
there,"
over, yeah.
because we were so used to having it there for a month.
That's
and what
right.
have you.
Yeah, there's no rush.
And we got home from the meal. And we ended up watching it on the news night, and being these were people that we'd been talking to 2 or 3 days before, sitting on their buses, etc., and just being smashed about by the police.
Those
And-
of us not there dodged a bullet, I suppose. But I've
Yeah.
always regretted that I wasn't in there. So
I
feel
sort of
a little
regret it,
bit
but I
like
also-
orbital.
Mm.
The word that springs to mind.
I sort of
First
regret
time.
it, but having talked to many people who were on the Beanfield, I mean, so many of them ended up with post-traumatic
They didn't ask to
stress,
be there, did
etc.
they?
No, exactly. These were people of peace.
They smashed people's families that day. They smashed their own.
Yeah, definitely. I like to call it the ambush on the A303 rather than Battle of the Beanfield.
It was an ambush.
Yeah. It was orchestrated like a military
They
operation.
directed him into a field that there was only one entrance exit. There was no escape.
Yeah.
So basically, in 1986, at the Tory party conference, Maggie Thatcher says, "I am delighted to do anything within my powers to make life difficult for people like the hippie peace convoy." And from that moment on, I knew I was at war.
Yeah.
You know, my system had then declared war on my community.
On your society.
You know, it's
your
like
family,
saying,
yeah.
we don't like Watford. Let's
we're
ostracise
gonna get
Watford.
that lot from Watford.
You know what I mean?
They've
And so
had it.
Thatcher said, we're delighted to do
Watford's had
anything within our power to, you know, against
to
it.
put a stop to it.
And then you've got, you know,
Well,
that
you know
whole
what
year.
we've seen, the Criminal Justice
Yeah.
Act, we've seen what I believe is a flooding of heroin
Yeah,
into the sites.
since Afghanistan, you know, have you noticed how much heroin's been on the street?
Yeah,
you know,
and have you noticed how that then spread it throughout the country? What was a
Yeah.
city thing? They got
Yeah.
dealers in villages, small
Yeah.
towns.
Yeah.
Every little town's got a heroin dealer now.
Definitely.
That's Thatcher's thought,
Yeah, her legacy.
and her lack is the special branch.
Yeah. And they also ruined Special Brew, you know. they changed the recipe. In 1989,
Yeah,
you know what? Before 1989, all the complaints I've ever heard about Special Brew is
And the
people
brew
falling
crew.
asleep at the front of the stage, falling asleep
They're
in,
not trumpet
in each other's
people.
tent. No, the Special Brew was made for Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill had been doing so much amphetamine to get him through the war ministries, you know, late night meetings, the bombing of London at night and
Yeah.
that. He'd been doing loads of amphetamines. After the war, he was hanging. And so the King of Denmark, who was happy that his country had been liberated from the Nazis, went to its brewers at Carlsberg and said, right, we want a special brew made for Winston Churchill.
So
And
you
it had
sleep
skullcap
better.
and valerian in it.
So you can sleep better.
Yeah, it was made as a
How about
sleeping
that?
beer.
Yeah, because I always heard there was valerium
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah. Well, in
Is there still
1989,
valerium in it?
No.
They took
in
it out.
1989, they changed the recipe. And
What have they
I
put
still
in it
remember
now
it well
then?
because I was, what was I was 18 or whatever. I remember being put up on, you know, going into like booze warehouses and being put up on the shelves to crawl around looking for the ones with little crowns on the ring pull because those were the old school ones.
Really?
And those had the, and it's only from 1989 onwards that you get all the complaints about brew crew being violent, aggressive, nasty
yeah,
people.
The Hackney Hell crew.
Exactly. But it was to do with that change of recipe. Whatever they did to that recipe created the brew
The
that then
violence
created the brew
made
crew.
people thugs.
Yeah. Well, we look at Telscombe, you know, down near Brighton, that festival down near Brighton,
Yeah.
where the brew crew went on a bit of a rampage and ended up
They
burning.
pissed in the supermarket freezers
Yeah,
and things
apparently.
like that.
But they burnt Dave Brock's bus.
Oh, I remember
Dave
that
Brock of
incident.
Hawkwind.
But Dave Brock hit somebody with a monkey wrench, didn't he?
He went after him after it, yeah. But so basically, they burnt his bus
So
out.
who started it?
So Hawk depends which side you ask, innit? You know what I mean?
suppose. I know whose bus Dave Brock got on with his dogs in
Yeah.
the Hid.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Oh no, he was terrified, you know.
Yeah, because they were all
There was a
looking
lot of
for
brew
him,
crew
weren't they,
by then.
through the night.
But that was all to do with this recipe change. And this is what I've been...
You blame that on the change in special
Definitely,
brew that
definitely.
happened.
Well, the behaviour after
But
special
hitting
brew
somebody
change.
with a monkey wrench is a bit severe, isn't it?
Yeah,
But if
definitely.
they were being really, if he thought his life was in danger,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
you grab what you grab, don't
yeah.
you?
Well, I hope to be able to talk to Dave properly about it. I've been invited down to Hawkfest. His son's been in touch with me a few times saying he wants me to go down to
You
Hawkfest.
don't see. I was
So I
there
will
this
try
year.
and have a
I
decent
didn't see him
talk.
once except when he was on stage.
Yeah,
So we don't wander about.
I've got a way of seeing people, and
Eh?
I've got a
you
way of
have,
seeing
yeah,
people.
well, you can see.
Um,
there's no reason I should see him.
But so basically, I mean, we carry
really
on.
know him except to nod to.
Yeah. So we carry on. Yeah, we
He's
carry
tight
on.
with his tea, though.
Yeah.
Tell you that much.
Well, he's tight with his contracts as well. I'm still quite upset
Oh.
that him and Nick Turner can't get out. You know, I haven't seen Hawker in quite a few years
Yeah, they
because I
don't
don't
get
think
on,
you
do
can
they?
see a proper lineup.
No.
So anyway, carrying on with campaigning at Stonehenge. I mean, that's obviously ongoing. Campaigning every year for a festival
Yeah,
site.
but you carry the box. Is the box here, Wally
No,
Hope's box?
no.
No, where is it?
It's back in Somerset.
It's in
Yeah.
Somerset.
Yeah.
And Is
Resting
is
up, getting
it's
his-
coming on the solstice.
Oh, it's definitely
Because
getting
I'm
his
going
energy
this
up
year,
for solstice.
God
definitely.
willing.
Yeah.
I've been for about 4 years.
And we've tried various things. I mean, between 1986 and 99, there was an exclusion zone around Stonehenge where you couldn't go within 4 miles.
Yeah, I remember.
And in
Walking back to the woods and all that business.
Yeah, definitely.
Jesus.
That was after the riot.
They lined up at the top of the hill, didn't they? Like ancient warriors, and come down that hill with a load of people that didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Except be there a little bit.
Definitely. And that's why I carry on campaigning for Stonehenge.
We were made to all be along that fence, weren't we?
Yeah.
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 Near the hillstone.
And they pushed the women and the children down the hill, didn't they, when they brought the riot police through? Yeah.
Yeah, if you couldn't move fast, you were in trouble. Yeah. All the way back to the woods.
Yeah.
And then they were combing the woods afterwards.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's a disgrace.
So, I mean, we will campaign for Stonehenge every year.
You know, this country's always boasting about, free men of England and all that sort of thing, and the land of liberty.
A free man, if they like.
Then it treats its own. Well, we got a political prisoner dying in Bowsher.
Yeah.
Put in there by the leader of the Labour Party, who coincidentally also decided not to prosecute Jimmy Savile. So there's our socialist leader anyway.
Yeah.
So we haven't got a party to vote for.
Well,
sure. Not that the democratic process is in any way democratic.
My dad used to say if voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal.
They would over.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
so. How is it with Wally Hope? What's got any plans to? You're going to always carry the box.
Yeah,
you're going to take it every stone.
Always be going to some solstice with him. I mean, I take him to most equinoxes and the winter solstice as well. You know, I got the movie out. Penny's written more in Shibboleth, etc., telling more of the story.
Shibboleth.
Yeah,
what's Shibboleth?
That's Penny Rambo's book, where he goes into the story of Wally a bit deeper. I've
just got a CD of poems by Penny Rambo and Youth. Did together. I haven't got the cellophane off it yet. Have you got it?
Yeah.
Is it any good?
It's interesting, but Penny's, he always was more of an artist than a punk, really.
Yeah, I'll give it a listen.
Was quite manufactured, really.
He's not a bad poet.
No, he's no.
And Youth dabbles in, I wouldn't say dabbles, that would be fair, he writes poetry.
No, I've been invited out to Space Mountain to do one of the festivals out there,
nice.
sort of thing. But basically, carrying on campaigning for
Stonehenge. The Ugly, where that was filmed, it's just like that terrain. Anyway, go on.
Basically, just carrying on campaigning for Stonehenge each year. Wally becomes quite an important icon in that. So I'm getting the movie out. I've just shown it at the Radical History Festival in Bristol. And basically, if people get in touch with me and say they want the movie and they want to give it a showing, then they can have the movie. It's not something I'm aiming to make pennies out of or anything. It's about getting the message out there.
You are now one of the revered elders of the tribe.
Reviled. I guess, you know what it is? I've been collecting pictures, people's photos, press photos. I've been collecting pictures of Stonehenge and what have you, pretty much since I was a teenager. And there's all these photos of people like John Pendragon.
In a book.
I'm working on it. Yeah, for the 50th anniversary, which is in because obviously 2024 is the 50th anniversary of the last Stonehenge festival. And then 5025 is the 5025 is the 50th anniversary of the beanfield. Right. So I'm aiming to do something for that as well.
50 years already.
Exactly. So basically, the campaign is growing again. We've got.
Within the young people now, there's a real wish for something, a yearning.
Definitely.
The times I get questioned by somebody under 25 about what it was actually like to go to a real free festival, a festival that was actually free. Nobody bothered in the entrance or the exit or the whatever. There was no commercial. I wouldn't have needed to buy a toasted cheese and tomato sandwich for £6.50.
£6.50, blind camera. So basically, I collected all these pictures of Stonehenge throughout the years.
It was toasted. God knows what they charge for pictures here.
No.
Right, can we wrap it there, guys? Because I've got 60 minutes of that.
that vest you're wearing? Is it itchy?
No, it's lovely.
Is it?
Yeah, I love
What
it.
about if it rains?
No, it's all right.
No,
it's
it's
all
not
good.
itchy.
No, it's all. It's,
I've been wondering that
Okay.
the whole time. I think that must be bloody itchy. How
Yeah.
does he wear that?
well,
How do you wear your Action
I'm a
Man
little bit of a
pants?
cross-dresser, aren't I?
How do you wear your Action Man pants?
Yeah.
I grow them.
Yeah. Get bigger with you today.
And then he has them back. I shrink them in the wash when he needs them back. He's got 2 pairs.
Wicked.
Virgil.
Right.
But nice one for doing Unknown Soldier.
Thanks,
Because
Dean.
since
Thank you
'86,
for
I've
doing
loved
that.
that song.
Oh,
And
you're
hearing
welcome.
Wally's name in that song. And I remember talking to you at Glastonbury, just a little bit before we'd done Call to the Tribes. And I remember sitting outside with you at one of the bars, I think it might have been the Chelsea bar around the
Yeah,
back of the
yeah.
Unfairground. And I said it would be really nice if we had a song that sort of mentioned the Beanfield crew and the people of Stony Cross and that. And then later on you brought out that Call to the Tribes. So
That's right.
thank you for being a sings person of our movement, Chris.
I'm honoured, mate. You
Loved
said,
you
just
since
said
the
that.
80s,
Thank you
mate.
very much. Thank you. Yeah, but this is about you.
Love
not
you
me.
forever, brother.
And you, mate.
No, it's always about all of us.
Always.
Always about all
I'm
of us.
certainly Chris
You're a
Wally.
Wally.
I'm Chris
Chris
Wally.
Wally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Steve Wally over
Steve
there.
Wally.
Greg Wally
Yeah.
there. Captain Jack Wally there.
Captain Jack Wally, yeah. Lynn Wally.
Lindy Wally there.
Lindy Wally.
Lindy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you.